The impact of President Trump's 145% tariffs on Chinese goods is playing out in real time at American ports.
It began quietly, just paperwork and lines of code buried deep in customs databases, container manifests, and export licenses. But by the first week of May 2025, it was no longer hidden. It had become a global reckoning. The largest food trade war in human history is now in full swing, and its shockwaves are hammering farmers, choking supply chains, and leaving the world's most vulnerable nations on the brink of famine. This isn't speculation. It's happening right now, and the consequences go far beyond inflation. They signal collapse. Welcome to the year global food security shattered. Before we dive in, hit that like button to help us out with the YouTube algorithm and to show your support. Let's start with China. In a move that sent markets reeling, Beijing slapped a 34% tariff on all imports from the United States.
China announced this morning that from next week, they will be imposing 34% tariffs on all U.S. goods.
Overnight, every shipment of corn, soybeans, wheat, pork, and dairy bound for China from the United States was suddenly priced out of the market. Decades of agricultural trade, built on fragile diplomacy and mutual dependence, were undone in a single stroke.
Are all down, and farmers depend on those three commodities to hold on to our farms. So farmers right now are facing really trying times, and the president is going to put a lot of farmers out of business.
The world's largest agricultural importer had just slammed the door on its former top supplier. In the blink of an eye, Chicago's soybean futures plunged. Corn prices followed, contracts vanished, silos overflowed, and export vessels were forced to reroute. China didn't blink. Within 72 hours, Chinese buyers secured over 2 million tons of soybeans from Brazil, paying $1.20 per ton premium just to avoid American supply. Brazilian ports are now overwhelmed. Barges are running non-stop along the Amazon River. Exporters in Brazil called the surge unprecedented. Meanwhile, in the United States, grain elevators went quiet. Across the Midwest, farmers began hauling unsold crops back into storage. Some were forced to sell below cost. Others gave up and stopped planting altogether. The American Soybean Association issued a stark warning. This wasn't a temporary disruption. It was a total collapse of a key export market. And China wasn't done. Just days later, Beijing turned its sights on Canada. After Ottawa sided with Washington on trade policy, China retaliated with full force. 100% tariffs on Canadian canola, oil, and peas, and 25% tariffs on pork and seafood. Within days, millions of dollars worth of Canadian exports sat stranded in port warehouses with nowhere to go.
The biggest hit will be on canola, a key cash crop on the prairies. China is slapping a 100% tariff on canola oil and related products. It's taking effect with canola prices already low. China is also targeting Canadian seafood, 25% tariffs there that cover 40 products fished on Canadian coasts, including crab and lobster. There's also a 25% tariff on Canadian pork sold to China.
Western farmers, especially in Saskatchewan and Alberta, were suddenly stuck with crops they couldn't sell and prices in freefall. The Premier of Alberta called it economic blackmail, but Beijing dismissed the accusation, calling it simple reciprocity. Then came the European Union. Angered by U.S. tariffs on metals, the EU hit back with a 25% tariff on American corn, targeting a vital link in the global food chain. The blow landed hard. Feed producers in Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands had relied on cheap U.S. corn to fill the gap left by disrupted Ukrainian supplies. Now that source is gone. Desperate European buyers are scrambling to secure grain from Brazil and Ukraine, but at a steep premium. Farmers are warning that pork and poultry prices could spike within weeks. As for soybeans, the EU spared them for now. But tariffs on U.S. soy are already scheduled for review this December. In the meantime, prices continue to rise. But this wasn't just about retaliation, it was something deeper: protectionism. India, the world's largest exporter of rice, shocked global markets by abruptly banning all exports of non-basmati white rice. Almost half of India's rice trade was frozen overnight. The result? Global rice prices skyrocketed. Importers across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East suddenly found themselves cut off. Panic buying erupted in countries like Bangladesh and the Philippines. Some nations moved quickly to stockpile whatever they could find. Elsewhere, people simply watched store shelves empty. Then came Eastern Europe. Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia unilaterally banned all imports of Ukrainian grain, accusing Kyiv of dumping cheap wheat and corn into their markets. Shockingly, the European Commission sided with them. For Ukraine, already desperate to move its harvests overland with the Black Sea effectively under siege, it felt like betrayal. Overnight, the last major land corridor for Ukrainian exports narrowed even further, and it didn't stop there. Russia tightened its own export quotas. Kazakhstan introduced new licensing restrictions. Argentina abruptly froze all lemon exports. This isn't a supply chain anymore, it's a blockade. The World Bank has confirmed it. 19 countries have enacted 25 separate export bans in the past year. This isn't economic policy, it's siege warfare. And what happens under siege? Prices detonate. Soybeans are now selling at a premium. Corn is trading at record highs across Europe. Peas, canola, sunflower oil, all spiking. Meat producers from Europe to Asia are warning of rationing. Poultry prices are already surging. Pork is next. In import-dependent nations like Indonesia, Egypt, and Nigeria, food inflation has already soared past 15%. But that's only part of the story, because for every price spike, there's unrest. In Jakarta, protests over rice shortages turned violent last week.
We begin the news with Workers' Day unrest as several hundred United Nations employees rallied in Geneva to protest against budget cuts and mass layoffs affecting multiple UN agencies.
Crowds clashed with police. Supermarkets were looted. Food trucks were hijacked on highways. In Nairobi, outraged meat market vendors set government posters ablaze after a wave of new taxes and food price hikes hit the streets. In Beirut, chaos erupted as protesters stormed a grain depot controlled by political elites, forcing the military to intervene. The United Nations has issued a stark warning. Over 100 million people could face acute food insecurity this summer if global trade flows aren't restored. But this crisis isn't just about hunger anymore. It's about power. Food has become a weapon, used as leverage, as currency, as punishment. Russia has already made its demands clear. Lift Western sanctions or the grain corridors stay closed.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. The Kremlin says it's halted its participation in the Black Sea grain deal. Moscow says its conditions for extending the deal had not been fulfilled. It was due to expire later on Monday.
China is now demanding reduced tariffs in exchange for resuming pork and soybean purchases. In Washington, the response has been largely defensive. The USDA rolled out a $1.3 billion aid package aimed at supporting specialty crop producers. Trade negotiators are scrambling to strike new deals with Southeast Asian nations, and emergency summits are underway. But the collapse shows no sign of stopping. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Behind the politics, the human cost is mounting. In the United States, small farmers are going under. In Illinois, one soybean grower set fire to his remaining inventory in protest. The video went viral. The caption read, "No one to sell it to, no one who cares." In Texas, a family-run pork operation laid off 20 workers after their Chinese buyer canceled every shipment through the end of the year. In California, a fruit exporter dumped entire containers of spoiled oranges after a planned shipment to Canada was abruptly canceled. But the pain isn't confined to rural America. In inner-city Detroit, food banks are overwhelmed. In South Los Angeles, eggs are now selling for $8 a dozen. In parts of Appalachia, grocery stores are cutting back hours and reducing product lines just to stay open. And the black market? It's booming. From Florida to New York, illegal shipments of Mexican tomatoes and rice are being smuggled across the border. One enforcement official called it the new prohibition. Only this time it's produce. Across Latin America, smugglers are moving Indian rice, Venezuelan corn, and Brazilian beef under forged documents to evade export bans and tariffs. In one case, a shipment of Vietnamese rice was caught being relabeled as Cambodian just to dodge India's export restrictions. This is the new normal. It's no longer a trade system, it's a food war. And like any war, there are winners: Brazil, Russia, Argentina. Brazil's soybean exports are at record highs. Russia has now overtaken the United States as China's top wheat supplier. Argentina is ramping up beef exports to Asia and the Middle East. These nations are forming a new food axis. Their contracts are longer, their buyers more loyal, their governments more aligned. Meanwhile, the United States is shrinking. U.S. food exports are down more than 20% year over year. Ports are running at half capacity. Barge traffic on the Mississippi River has dropped to a 3-year low. Farmers are angry, trade groups are sounding the alarm, and Congress, still stuck in gridlock. And while America debates, the rest of the world moves on, striking new deals, forging new routes, building a new global food order. The map is being redrawn, and the country that once fed the world is now watching from the sidelines, because what started as policy has become punishment. If you found this content valuable, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next update. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.